On Tuesday the 15th of June, in Halifax, a man is walking down the road when a large figure appears. The figure started tweeting abusive messages at the man, who tried to ignore it, but then he was attacked from behind. The man attempted to fight the figure off, but he was unable to defend himself against the attacker. The man was severely pecked all around his body and was found semi-conscious in the middle of the street. He was bleeding from wounds on and around his foot cuffs located at his feet and leg pits housed just under the bend of the knee. The attacker was described as being yellow, pointy, and extremely aggressive. A photo fit of the attacker looks like this. It's advised that you don't approach him and that he's reported to the nearest ITV franchise. If you think you know who this is, call Crime Stoppers now anonymously. You may even get a reward. Hello, welcome to the Television Affair. My name is Johnny Robinson, and firstly I want to say thank you so much if you've subscribed already. If you haven't, then press it now. Only good can come from it. You can find out when my next video is, and I get to know how many people care about it. Today we're carrying on from where we left off in the last video, looking at Analogue satellite across Europe. Only looking at Analogue at the moment, and the channels that launched before 1997 and what happened to them. Now, way back at the start in episode 1, I mentioned that my dad got a satellite box in the early 1990s, and between then and 2005, we had stints of analog satellite, analog cable, and eventually digital satellite. But in 2005, I moved out of my dad's, and I went to move up north to a place called Thornton in Bradford, and I went to go live with some relatives. So I lived with my uncle, and my granddad was around every so often, but he lived round the corner with my gran. Now, although Sky Digital launched in 1998, analog satellite TV was still available, and things were winding down around 2005, but you could still pick up some channels. Now, I was living with my uncle, and I got to discover old-style satellite towards the end of its life, although there were not many UK TV channels on it. In fact, I managed to discover more European channels which were still using it, and I remember watching Viva and Kika around 2005, and the viewing of this would usually happen on a Friday or Saturday evening, and also usually happen over drinks at the Blue Ball around the corner, and then go back to my uncle's afterwards, and then it would be accompanied by takeaways from Adams, which I hear that doesn't exist anymore. The only explanation is that they got so popular they couldn't stay open. I don't know. 2005 feels like yesterday, but that's what happens when you get old. Anyway, I'll mention this a little bit more later, but I remember regaining the fascination of watching TV channels from other countries. When I was a kid, it kind of felt like a quirk, like you shouldn't be able to see this kind of thing, but I am. Anyway, first channel for today, the Quantum Channel. The Quantum Channel used to broadcast during Eurosport's downtime. It sounds cool because Quantum Channel sounds like a really good name for a channel, but actually it was the shittest channel ever. It was a poor excuse for a shopping channel, just playing infomercials and constant advertising of bundled goods. I remember sometimes when I'd come downstairs and turn the telly on a bit too early before Children's Channel came on, and I'd end up seeing stuff like this, especially for something called DD7, which is like some stain removal stuff, and like they put it in the blue water and then it changed all the blue water into white.
Everything turns pink. Ink from a broken marker pen. Even iodine. A little multi-purpose DD7 in the final rinse, and it's goodbye to all those awkward stains forever.
There was something about watching it, though, that made it a bit weird. A bit like Ronald McDonald can burst out through the screen and set your house on fire at any point. But yeah, it was mostly get this set of pens and get a free cushion. Don't you just hate it when you don't have enough pair of hands? Don't you just hate washing cars? Polsat broadcast to Poland, launching in December 1992, and it was available via Eutelsat. Because of licensing issues in Poland, the company didn't actually broadcast from there. They came from the magical land of Hilversum in the Netherlands. We mentioned that a couple times today. Polish programming was flown in by plane and not by butterflies. They eventually got a legal license to broadcast from the Polish National Broadcasting Council, and started broadcasting from Poland. They would go on to have their own versions of Pop Idol and Strictly, along with Polish dubbed versions of American shows. It would be the first TV station in Poland to air that wasn't owned by the government. TV Polonia, on the other hand, is the international channel from state broadcaster TVP in Poland. It broadcasts in Polish, and TVP has a long history in Poland dating back to 1952, but Polonia came to air in 1992. It's targeted to Polish-speaking audiences outside Poland and broadcasts many of the shows on its domestic channels. In Poland, TVP has come under some major criticism over the past 10 years. The Law and Justice Party, who were the right-wing opposition, used to get funny about the station siding with the government and compared it to government propaganda. In 2015, the government passed a law so it could decide the head of the TVP group. Since then, the right-wing party came into government and have been running the show, with critics saying that the government propaganda has amplified, painting the LGBTQ community, political opposition, Jews and other groups as seeking to undermine Poland. The station is the least trusted with its news content, and it's a great reminder as to why it's important that we have the BBC and why we shouldn't fuck with its structure. Deutsche Welle is funded by the German Federation tax budget, although it's independent from the government in its running, being regulated by the Deutsche Welle Act. It's part of the European Broadcasting Union like the BBC, which means Germany always gets a free space in Eurovision. It's currently available in 32 languages. It's been broadcasting since 1953, starting off with radio and moving into television. Emirates Dubai TV used to be a TV channel broadcasting in Arabic for expats in the UAE. It started in 1979 but came to cable in 1995 and got replaced by Dubai TV in 2004. NBC also broadcasts in Arabic. It launched in 1991, originally based in London but moved to Dubai in 2002 and more recently to Riyadh in 2022. It now has NBC's 1 to 5, NBC Action, NBC Drama, NBC Max, NBC Persia, and a number of other channels.
EuroNews, the latest news every 30 minutes. You're listening to EuroNews in English, but did you know we broadcast simultaneously in French, German, Spanish, Italian and Arabic? The number of viewers is growing all the time. EuroNews is completely independent and managed by ITN, one of the world's leading news broadcasters. News, live events, European culture and society. It's all here on EuroNews.
EuroNews broadcasts across Europe, and although its main service is in English, there are/were local versions. It started in January 1993, and the main point of it was to broadcast a massive picture of a tardigrade. That's not right. You'll need to replace the words massive picture of a tardigrade to news for European people, though. It came about when CNN decided it was sure that 24-hour news was the way to go in 1992, and the European Broadcasting Union wanted to establish a European perspective on the news. So they hooked up with CyBC in Cyprus, France Televisions, Rai Italy, RTBF in Belgium, RTP in Portugal, RTVE in Spain, TMC in Morocco, Tele in Finland, and ERTU in Egypt. In 1997, ITN got a 49% share of EuroNews, In 2003 though, ITN sold their share and noped out completely. Ukraine joined for a little bit, but then they left in 2015 when pro-Russian oligarch Dmitry Firtash took over the Ukraine service. So basically, to cut a long story short, they tore up the license, gave him the middle finger, told him to suck his mum, that kind of thing. The station used to live in Lyon, with an additional studio in London in 1996. It moved in 2015 to a fancier gaff. Then in 2016, this peacock strolled in. The executive board was talking to NBC Universal about partnering, and it would become a 25% owner of EuroNews. Things started getting peppered with Peacock across the whole output, and some local versions were even dropped or reduced. Then the Peacock just left. Why? Well, you might remember that NBC Universal got purchased by Sky, which was then purchased by Comcast, and there was talks of an international news channel. But this fell through during the pandemic, and its share was sold to Alpac Capital. And earlier this year, it was announced that the editorial would move to Brussels. TVE International came from Spain, and it's the international version of TVE. I can't blame the writer for this bit, by the way. This is all my fault. It's state-owned, and it came on air from the 1st of December 1989 with tests and launching properly on the 1st of December 1990, which is actually quite a long time to be testing. Anyway, you can't get it here anymore, but it is still going. TMF, not the motherfucker, no, it stands for the Music Factory, and it was a 24-hour music channel operated by Viacom in the Netherlands. It started in 1995 by the director of Radio 538 and Arcade Records. It was the first Dutch music TV station to battle MTV Europe. And back then, you didn't really see any Dutch music on TV, well, other than that one I showed you in episode 1. MTV bought it in 2002, and it slowly grew across Belgium and then the UK. We had it on Freeview in 2002, and it was a rival to The Hits. You've probably forgotten about that one as well. That was owned by EMAP, who is now called Bauer, and they own the Hits Radio Network and Greatest Hits Radio. Back to the Netherlands though, and for a few years it was outdoing MTV Netherlands in ratings, but those started to dip, and then the channel was switched off in 2011. It switched off over here on October the 26th, 2009, and it was replaced by Viva, which we've already covered. RTS Sat was also known as RTB Sat and RTS Sat with a J. Oh, and also RTS Svet. It was the international version of what was originally called RTB, Radio Television Belgrade, but it got renamed RTS, Radio Television Serbia, in 1990. It started out doing radio in the late 1920s, and then it started doing TV in 1958. The station had become more of a mouthpiece, though, of Slobodan Milosevic. He was the Serbian president who had mashed all of the media together to create a propaganda machine. Now, I've already mentioned a couple of naughty Germans that did this previously, but this is more of a modern day. We're talking like the 90s here. This happened around the time of the Kosovan Wars. Now, I'm not up on this enough to go into details, but in 1999, shit got real at RTS because it got bombed by Nato. Basically, he took things too far in the Kosovan War and decided, hey guys, cleansing Albanians is the way to go. Yeah, it wasn't. So NATO stepped in and they went completely apeshit on Yugoslavia.
Friday's bombing of the television headquarters has for the first time destabilized the Serbian power structure. President Milosevic now needs control of the remaining broadcasting centers. The Deputy Prime Minister Vuk Draskovic, a former leader of the opposition, is determined to hold on to his part of it. The coming hours will decide if Milosevic can contain this situation or whether it will spill over and damage his war effort.
And although France and Germany wasn't happy with it because NATO was attacking schools and even the Chinese embassy, the TV station had warnings to staff and the general manager from NATO, but NATO went ahead with it. Anyway, general manager of RTS was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison for failing to evacuate the station. Although it was bombed, it would come back on a few hours later and eventually rebuild, but a part of the building was left as a reminder of the 16 people that lost their lives there. Now, the station was banned from Eutelsat from using its satellites during the NATO conflict, probably because of the propaganda situation, and Eutelsat's also done this more recently for Russia and Iran. By 2008, things were looking up. They hosted the Eurovision final. In 2011, RTS issued an apology on how its programming was misused to spread propaganda and discredited the country's opposition party. To be fair, it's not like they had a choice really, is it? Can you imagine the meeting they would have had to go to? Demetrio, who visits me today? Bill Clinton on phone at 3:30? Yes. Probably to tell me to stop it. Ha ha ha. What else? You have war before and after. Oh, and man from RTS channel waiting outside. Oh, let him in. Oh, hello, my good friend. How are things at Propaganda Machine?
They are good, thank you.
Well, that's what we tell you to say. Ha ha ha. Am I right?
Yeah, Mr. Milosevic.
Please call me Slobodan.
Okay, Slobodan. Me and the guys, we have decided to not do Propaganda Machine today.
Oh, that is a very big shame, Demetrio. Where is my gun? I think even on the way there, walk into the room to meet the president, like trying to explain what's going on. What is purpose of meeting?
We are no longer do Propaganda Machine at RTS. It's not cool.
But you will be fired.
What is purpose of that cannon?
You will be fired. Anyway, RTS is still on the air. It has a few other channels now as well. Apparently, to celebrate its 50th anniversary of the RTS News Bulletin, all babies born on the 23rd of August 2008 got a flat screen TV from RTS. Although I am a bit jealous that they got flat screen TVs and when I was born I got fuck all. But still, do I want a propaganda machine? Do I want a conservative government? I think conservative government just scrapes past. Canal, or canal, means channel in French, and plus means plus, or the other way around. Anyway, Canal Plus is a network of TV stations. However, the first one, Canal Plus, was launched in 1984, just like me. And it was owned by Vivendi, not like me, which is a mass media company that holds a number of channels and divisions. That includes Canal Cinema, Canal Plus Kids, Canal Plus Stocks, Canal Plus Sport 360, and the M7 Group, as well as Studio Canal and a load of other stuff. Basically, they own loads of cable stations. They make their own programs as well as popular programs that are dubbed in French, specifically Rugrats, The Cramp Twins, Will and Grace, and The Simpsons.
Goedemiddag, dit is Euro 7, het eerste Nederlandse commerciële televisiestation. Vandaag beginnen we met onze uitzendingen.
Euro 7 was a Dutch commercial TV station founded by a guy called Dupe Post, with publishing company Kiesing and PMT Holding. It started broadcasting in 1994, and it was the first commercial television station with a Dutch broadcasting license, and the station was about nature, the environment, leisure, spiritual stuff, and religious matters. It was bought by a televangelist, and it closed in 1997. Not really sure why. Probably that. ARD is a joint organisation of Germany's regional public service broadcasters, which gets its funding from the TV licence. The best way to describe it is a bit like the old-style ITV regions, with ARD station being the equivalent to the main ITV, and local companies responsible for the regional broadcasting, but then funded by a TV licence like the BBC, also being independent to the government. It operates a national TV network called Das Erst, which means the first, and to differentiate itself from ZDF, which is known as the second, members of ARD include Deutsche Welle, MDR, NDR, and Radio Bremen. ZDF is a German public service broadcaster, and it's a non-for-profit institution. It was founded by all federal states of Germany in 1963, and it gets its funding from advertising and a TV license. It came to Astra in 1993, and it's a member of the EBU. It was created to compete against ARD because they felt ARD's news coverage was too critical of the government. Since then, it's worked with them, as we're about to see. In 1997, Phoenix TV was a joint venture between ARD and ZDF. Helmut Kohl, former German Chancellor, wanted to make a European parliamentary channel, but ARD and ZDF weren't on board. But viewers told them that actually a current affairs and documentary channel was what they were all up for. Some of the shows would include documentaries from ARD and some from ZDF's archive, as well as German dubbed shows from Discovery and BBC. Hey you! If you're enjoying these videos and you'd like to help me make more, then why not leave me a tip or contribution to any of these sites. This will make sure I'm kept hydrated and I keep my focus while I'm editing these videos, so I don't click off and watch some cat video or something. And if you're not already, don't forget to subscribe and keep up to date with the latest videos. Kinderkanal launched in 1997, and it's a kids TV channel broadcasting across Germany. It's a joint venture between ARD and ZDF. Some of the shows are the standard thing that you'd find on a kids channel across the world: Cramp Twins, Clifford the Big Red Dog, Fireman Sam, and some of its own programming. The station's mascot is this guy. He's a depressed bread, and his name is Bernd Das Brot, as in burn the bread. Mist. Back in 2005, I made a big move in my life. I'd gotten fed up of life in Swindon, and I moved in with my uncle in Bradford in West Yorkshire. We would regularly start messing around with my camera and his DVD player and some old tapes, and YouTube was in its infancy at this time, so we didn't really do a lot with it. He also had an old satellite dish, one of the big ones from the early 90s, and I think we found a set-top box at Bingley Car Boot, and we plugged it in after a night at the pub and having an Adam's takeaway. And and it must have been around 1 or 2 in the morning, and we were just flicking around, and then we met Bernd Das Brot on the TV doing something called the Kika Lounge, I think it was, and like there was a party, and then there was a character that looked a bit like Red from Fraggle Rock but not, and then also there was like this guy who just like he was like a plant or something, and stuff grew from his head. It was really odd. Like, yeah, talking German at you at 2 o'clock in the morning was a bit freaky, but actually quite funny. But yeah, Bernd was our intense fascination. This depressed bread was our mascot. This went further than just a funny joke, though.
It became life.
One day, the old prankster that I am, I decided that I was going to print out a load of pictures of Bernd and stuff them everywhere I could. So in DVD cases, at the bottom of the tea bags bin, underneath the carpet, between the books, inside clothes pockets, between small gaps in wardrobes and cabinets, behind units, on top of the units, between cushions and mattresses, curled up between gaps in the floorboards or like the door frame or something, or anything I could think of. I just stuffed a Bernd picture in, and I must have printed out about 50 of these things. Anyway, my uncle found a small number of Bernds at that time. By the time I'd left, he'd not found all of them. And the thing is, the house wasn't just his, it was officially my granddad's. Although he did live round the corner with my gran, that was unofficial at the time. It's okay to say, because they can't do anything to him now on account of his death. Same as my gran, she was not very well, unfortunately, in 2006, and she had cancer, so she decided to spend the rest of her life back at my uncle's/granddad's house. Not Uncle Granddad's house, that's a completely different thing. Anyway, so in order to care for my gran, they had to move the sofa, and they had to move everything out of the way, which means that they found a bunch of Bernds in the sofa and under the sofa, and then when they had to put my gran in the bed in the corner, they found some other Bernds in the corner and around the units around there. So there was some in there. Then after she'd passed away, a lot of her stuff was still at my granddad's house because she did live there before and then moved out. It was a bit complicated. But basically, a lot of her stuff was still at that house. So what happened is when they started moving all of that stuff and finding out what she had and what she was giving away and what was getting kept and thrown and that, again, a load of Bernds happened. I think then every so often the odd Bernd was found, but that nothing mega. But then over the years as well, my granddad passed away, and I would get the odd message from my uncle telling me him or my granddad had found another Bernd, until he moved out, triggering the possible third wave of the Bernding, which I have no clue about what happened, but I would suspect the rest was found by the council as they tidied up the house and pulled up the carpets and stuff. Anyway, had fun with that. Didn't get to see the full outcome of it. However, it was a hoot, and I'd totally do it again in a snap. ZDF Music Channel was a music channel. Originally, it was part of the cable pilot projects in West Germany, and it used ZDF's archives. So a lot of 70s top of the pops looking recordings came out of that, opposed to the standard music channel type thing that you get on MTV.
Ein harter Tag singt jetzt die Beatles Revival Band.
Das war ein harter Tag. Ich hab geschuftet wie ein Vieh. Das war ein harter Tag. Und ich werd schlafen wie noch nie. Doch wenn ich heimkomm zu dir und du stehst schon an der Tür, fühl ich mich wieder sehr stark. Ich schufte jeden Tag, dir zu kaufen.
It remained its own channel until 1989 before 3Sat came along, and then it became part of 3Sat, and then it would finish in December 1993. TV3 was a Swedish channel launching on New Year's in 1987, and it was the first commercial broadcaster in Sweden, Norway and Denmark, but it came from London. That's because advertising wasn't allowed in Sweden, so it did a Radio Luxembourg by not being in the area it was for, and the government couldn't do really much about it. You'll notice actually a lot of the videos I'm talking about today and in the last episode that is the case, that they broadcast from a different country, especially RTL, because although they've got a big focus on the Netherlands, they don't actually have licensing for the Netherlands, which is why they have different rules and why they don't have to say when the adverts are coming on. Anyway, in 1989 it became available through cable in many cities, and TV3 won its audience by gaining the rights to broadcast the Ice Hockey World Championships and also the Wimbledon Tennis Championships. Not many people in Sweden could pick the station up though, so they had made a deal with SVT, which was the local Swedish public broadcaster, by delaying it around 15 minutes. In return, music channel ZTV was launched as a programme block on TV3. Hello, Future Johnny here, and whilst I was editing, I realised I missed out a really interesting bit, which is that TV3 split up into different versions in the early 1990s, one for Sweden, one for Norway, and another for Denmark. There are also now more TV3 channels for Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Slovenia, and Hungary, and they all broadcast from Middlesex. The reason they do that is to get out of the difficulties of the licensing in regards to TV advertising in those countries. Talking of Middlesex, back to Past Johnny. Now here's the bit where we would put up the red triangle. Yeah, because this is where I would talk about the adult channel and Playboy TV. Now we're going to be all modesty duck about this and nicely skip over it in kind of a way. If you know what they were, then you know, and I can play some of the idents because these ones don't really contain anything modesty duck needs to be present for. Moving swiftly on. Bloomberg TV came to the UK in 1997. It's based in London, which is the European headquarters, and it originates from New York, named after that Bloomberg guy that owns it. Vox is a German channel which launched on January the 25th, 1993. It's owned by RTL and it's broadcast live with informational programmes and was owned by a number of German media companies. Things weren't working out in 1994. They went into liquidation, but they did get helped out by Rupert Murdoch, who took 50% share, along with Canal Plus and UFA Bertelsmann. They're a media conglomerate, and also a company called DCTP, which also took less than 0.5% of ownership. Now that stands for Development Company for Television Programme. And that's a bit of a weird one to work out, but basically what I figured out is that they have lots of different percentages in different companies in various different places. And all of their programmes get played on those companies. So they take 0.5% and get to play half an hour of the video that they made, which is actually pretty handy. They have their own editorial, so regardless on what channel they're on, they're allowed to make shows about whatever the heck they want, which actually is usually shows about culture. Anyway, in 1999, Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation would get bought out by RTL.
Radio Television on RTE 1 now, Wednesday 6-1 News with Eileen Dunn.
RTE is an Irish TV company with roots going back to 1926 when it held its first radio broadcasts. It's currently broadcasting today and it mainly broadcasts on terrestrial television, however it could be picked up on via satellite because it's on Sky Digital. However, in the past it had been involved with joint ventures such as Europa, which we mentioned earlier, and also radio station Atlantic 252, which was a joint venture between RTE and Radio Luxembourg owners RTL. They did the same thing with that as Radio Luxembourg did, which is they got the license with the Irish broadcaster and they managed to broadcast the whole of the UK via the back door. But that's radio, so that's another story. It's licensed by the Irish media regulator. I'm not going to even attempt to try and say it, along with advertising on the station. They currently broadcast RTE 1, RTE 2, RTE News and RTE Junior.
This is Sky News, a part of the British Sky Broadcasting Network.
Such an obvious one that I kind of didn't cover and kind of did. I gave it a quick mention before, but Sky News launched on the 5th of February 1989, and it was part of Sky's first set of channels after launching on the Astra satellite. When it launched, it was quite innovative because around that time, we didn't have 24-hour rolling news in the UK, and compared to the BBC and ITV's output at the time, it's quite polished and a bit American looking. Tele5 started out as a German music channel called Music Box in 1984 until 1988, but not that Music Box. It was rebranded to Tele5 when Silvio Berlusconi purchased it. He was collecting TV stations like Pokemon at the time, but making sure that they were all 5 branded in their names. This included Canal 5 in Italy, Telecinco in Spain, and La Cinq, as mentioned before. I completely forgot about this channel until I heard the music for it, and I was like, do you know what, that just takes me back. Japan Satellite Television was broadcasting to viewers in Europe, in the Middle East and in North Africa, and it started in 1990, coming from London. It was originally homed in a 2-hour slot between TCC and Lifestyle Satellite Jukebox, and it jumped around for a bit before launching a 24-hour service, and now it lives on digital. TV Asia launched in the UK for Asian people living in Europe. It came to Sky in 1990 and it was the first entertainment and information channel in Europe for the South Asian community. It would later be purchased by ZTV from India, who would rebrand the station. NTV isn't part of Noel's House Party, no. It was a German free-to-air news channel and it's owned by RTL. It broadcasts magazine shows and documentaries and it started in 1992. The next couple of channels you might not have exactly seen here, as you might have had to move your dish about a bit, or you might have gone on holiday and seen them there. The BBC has been broadcasting international radio services since the 1930s, by terrestrial means for many of those years, mostly in short, medium and long wave. Originally it was called the BBC Empire Service, but this all changed in 1987 with BBC Europe. I can't find any footage of this, but I can see that in a couple of places that it was a thing. This was broadcast to continental Europe, and it was funded by subscription, and it was available on satellite and cable. It would play a bit of a mixed output of BBC One shows and BBC Two shows, and it wasn't available in the UK because those services were license funded. BBC Europe had commercials, and that's how it was funded. It was important to the BBC that they ensured that their international services and their home services were kept separate.
This is BBC World Service Television.
In March 1991, the channel became BBC World Service Television, named after its radio station, again, not funded by the government or the licence fee, but subscription and advertising. And the adverts were added by cable TV or satellite providers. This also played BBC programmes, including a CBBC slot. This was only available again across Europe and in Asia with a few minor changes. The BBC World Service for other parts of the world would be a 24-hour news service.
This is BBC World, the BBC's international news channel.
In 1995, the channel would split into two stations. BBC World, which is a rolling news service that was already existing everywhere else, came to Europe. And then the second service, BBC Prime, was a light entertainment and variety programme, and initially it included some programmes from Thames due to a joint venture with Pearson and Cox Communications. That partnership eventually dissolved, and in 1997 they got a new logo, which means some new idents.
You're now watching BBC World, the BBC's international news channel.
BBC World was going with this flag idea for a while, but Prime would have a completely new look, probably because flags were still on fleek with their branding, whereas the crystal looking thing kind of looked a bit early 90s BBC. In 1997 in the UK, BBC News 24 would launch, and it would share the flag look with BBC World, and BBC World would slowly align itself with BBC News 24's more drummy sound. The drummety drum flaggety flag would stick around until 1999, when there was a new dramatic rebrand. BBC News 24 changed to its drummety drum beepity beep in October 1999. It's the one that we're all still used to, and it's pretty much unchanged other than the odd remix. BBC World would get its rebrand 6 months later in April 2000 with the drummety drum beepity beep. So the two would sound a bit similar, but a bit different. The same, but not the same. Also, News 24 would end up with a rather stylish and still great looking by today's standards red and cream studio, which, yeah, it does look a bit small, but actually I think it looked pretty cool. BBC World would look more like today's setup with a busy newsroom behind it. There were occasions where the studios did change, that time when BBC all went off air because of the power cut, and also the time that this bomb went off outside BBC, and there was a bit of a mashup between the studios.
This is BBC News. Hello, I'm Gavin Esler. We're broadcasting from our Westminster studios.
Susan Osmond, the BBC's Westminster studios.
We're broadcasting here from our Westminster studios.
BBC News 24 would drop the 24 in its name in 2008, and it moved to New Broadcasting House in 2013. In April 2023, BBC News and BBC World News would merge together into one whole kit and caboodle. The whole shebang would be renamed BBC News. As for BBC Prime, that would be replaced by a new service called BBC Entertainment, and that would strangely be phased out depending on which country it was aimed at. So parts of Europe would pick it up until the end of November 2009. BBC Entertainment is still on air today, however there are a number of stations such as BBC Brit, BBC Earth, BBC Nordic and BBC First. And as for those, well, that's a whole other story. Right, television affair number 5 all done, and videos lined up across the coming weeks include My Fantasy TV Network. I'd love to hear about yours, but watch the video first, yeah? And then I'm going to be going into a series of shorter videos where we'll be looking at 3 channels in every episode and looking at their history. I'll also be doing some advert reviews, and what we're going to do is tear apart the adverts and then rate them in a golden goose symbol system. Anyway, that's all coming soon. Again, please do consider subscribing, liking and commenting. I've been Johnny Robinson, and I'll still be Johnny Robinson after this video's finished. Thank you, bye!